Dear participants, it brings me great pleasure to welcoming all of you to this webinar on safe living environments for women and girls. This event is organized together by Plan International Finland, Fida International, and the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Finland. My name is Janina Haasensson, and I work as a legal counselor in the Human Rights Policy Unit at the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Finland. As always, the best result is achieved when governmental and non-governmental actors work together. This event is yet another proof of this. My deepest thanks go to both advocacy specialist Anna Hyvärinen from Fida and advocacy advisor Hanna Wendelin from Plan International Finland, with whom we have had the pleasure of organizing this important event. As noted, today we are going to speak and hear presentations about the fundamental importance of protecting the rights of women and girls. This is always important and yet again extremely topical. As we know, and just to mention few, climate change, conflicts, the continuing COVID-19 pandemic, and the global anti-gender movement all threaten the rights of girls and women everywhere as we speak. Also, gender equality is under increasing pressure. Today we will in particular concentrate on the possibilities and challenges that are relevant for the European Union in its goal to take global leadership in advancing the rights of women and girls in all their diversity. Indeed, it's time to put words into action in accordance with the EU Action Plan on Human Rights and Democracy. We will hear important messages today from Nobel Laureate Mr. Dennis Mukwege and the EU Special Representative for Human Rights Mr. Eamon Gilmore. To avoid connection troubles, we will hear from Mr. Mukwege a pre-recorded statement in French with English subtitles. Dear audience, we also want to hear from you. Please take active part in the event. You are welcome to write comments and questions to the chat box beside the video. In the end of the webinar, we will do our very best to answer some of your questions. If you would like to mention your organization and title, please write them to your comment as well. Let me also remind you that we are following safe space principles in this event. Now, without further ado, let us proceed with the first presentation. It's my very good pleasure to introduce Executive Director Mr. Harri Hakola from Fida International. In his presentation, Mr. Hakola will set the scene for this event and give background for the crucial importance of the EU and its member states to promote the rights of women and girls as well as gender equality in all of its actions. The floor is yours, Harri.
It's my privilege to welcome you all to this webinar. My name is Harri Hakola, and I am the Executive Director of Fida International, a Finnish faith-based organization. Dear audience, special representative, we are living in a world where the rights of women and girls are widely neglected. That's why the theme of this webinar is very actual. Fida is promoting human rights in 15 developing countries. Safe living environments for girls and women is a priority theme in Fida's program. Safe living environments include the right to healthy, full and harmonious development as stated in the Convention of the Rights of the Child, and the right to integrity of the person as stated in the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. To achieve the realization of these rights, Fida focuses on preventing gender-based violence, teenage marriages, and teenage pregnancies by advocating for sexual and reproductive health and rights, menstrual health management, and by developing psychosocial support services. On the community level, Fida works for peace and social inclusion. We are partnering with Nobel Peace Laureate Dr. Dennis Mukwege, and it's a privilege to listen to his message in this webinar. Dr. Mukwege published recently a book titled The Power of Women. I just finished reading it. I am recommending to everyone. The book gives an influential message about the global status of women's rights. While reading the book, I was feeling sometimes angry and frustrated. The rights of women and girls are oppressed in all parts of the world. EU and its member states have a role to play in promoting the rights of women and girls. That's why EU has adopted the Gender Action Plan 3, GAP 3, and the Action Plan on Human Rights and Democracy 2020-2024, according to which the EU and its member states will promote women's and girls' full enjoyment of human rights, gender equality, and the empowerment of women and girls as a priority across all areas of action. Drawing from the EU Gender Equality Strategy 2020-2025, which calls for a gender equal Europe, EU Gender Action Plan for 21-25, GAP 3 calls for a gender equal world. According to GAP 3, there is, however, not a single country in the world that is close to achieving by 2030 gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. That's why the EU and EU member states should promote gender equality in their international relations. Thus, promoting gender equality through both action plans will complement efforts to accelerating progress towards meeting international commitments and a world in which everyone has a space to thrive. We are calling EU and all EU member states from words to action. Well-written, sound documents are needed. Both action plans are welcome. But what we often lack is a systematic implementation. Without determined actions, the words remain void. That's why we are calling for the EU and Finland to urgently prioritize the implementation of women's and girls' rights in all foreign policy action areas. We are not talking only about women's issue, but a grave human rights concern that should belong to the agenda of everyone, both women and men. We welcome that EU has taken the role of civil society seriously. According to the EU Action Plan on Human Rights and Democracy, implementation will be done in partnership with civil society. Many CSOs like Fida and Plan already have a long history in advancing what is in both of the action plans. And therefore, we are viable partners in implementation. I want to conclude my speech by quoting Dr. Mukwege's book. I hope for a world where women have the same opportunities for professional advancement and personal joy and fulfillment as men and where political power is shared equally. I believe all of this both desirable and possible. I believe that we can make contributions as individuals and as collective to make it happen. I believe in the power of women. Now it's my privilege to introduce the next speaker, Kunwar Krugman, Chair of International Board and the Members' Assembly of Plan International since November 2020. Ms. Krugman has previously been the Chair of Plan Finland and of the Development Policy Committee, advising the Finnish government on global issues. Kunwar Krugman will speak about advancing girls' and young women's rights in times of COVID-19. The floor is yours, Kunwar.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Krugman, and I have the honor of serving as the chair of Plan International. Plan International is a rights-based humanitarian and development INGO working for children's and especially girls' and young women's rights. Our organization is today present in more than 70 countries. And we deliver together with often with local civil society, life-saving humanitarian interventions and development programs addressing human rights of the most marginalized children and youth, and especially girls and young women. We do know that crises are deepening existing inequalities, and COVID-19 is no different, disproportionately affecting girls and young women. Beyond the strain put on health systems, children see their education severely disrupted by school closures and face hardships due to the loss of their families' livelihoods. Many young women, and this is a really sad fact, will never return to school. An additional 20 million secondary school-aged girls could be out of school after this crisis. And it doesn't end there. Increased rates of child, early and forced marriage, female genital mutilation, child labor, unintended and unwanted adolescent pregnancy, sexual exploitation and gender-based violence are only some of the pandemic's indirect consequences. From safety to education and from economic security to access to technology, the pandemic affects girls and young women in all aspects of their lives. Gains that we did do during the last 20 years are now being reversed under our watch. Before the pandemic, we needed, as women, to wait 99 years for full equality. Now, according to latest figures from the World Economic Forum, it's 136 years. But how do we tackle this? The EU Action Plan on Human Rights and Democracy can be part of the answer by protecting girls' and women's rights, as mentioned under Priority 1, protecting and empowering individuals. The action plan covers eliminating inequalities, discrimination, and exclusion, and does tackle issues like sexual and gender-based violence, harmful social norms, and the digital gender divide. Plan International welcomes the action plan and the Global Europe Human Rights and Democracy Programme, which aspires to leave no one behind. But what would leaving no one behind take? And let me here share with you 5 crucial things. First of all, we do need meaningful youth participation. Plan International supports youth-led collective action that is safe, that is meaningful, sustainable, strategic, and inclusive. The EU must promote legal and policy frameworks in partner countries that do protect civil and political rights of young people and create an environment where youth enjoy the fullest their right to influence decisions through meaningful consultations, through participation in decision-making, the right to protest, and the right to free speech. Secondly, protection of sexual reproductive health and rights. This is an area where we have seen a lot of decline the past years. We must challenge gender discriminatory norms and end sexual violence against girls. We need to strengthen girls' agency and ability to make autonomous and informed decisions about their sexual and reproductive health. We need to ensure the provision of comprehensive sexuality education and that health services meet adolescent-specific needs. The third point is about inclusive education. Education is a right and can be transformative in promoting gender equality. Access to school can delay unintended adolescent pregnancy and early childbirth, as well as it can prevent and respond to violence. Ensuring girls have access to school and removing discriminatory barriers that prevent pregnant girls and young mothers from completing their education is essential in eliminating child, early, and forced marriage. Girls in all their diversity must have access to inclusive and quality education. The fourth point is around recognizing the digital element. And here we just must ensure equal access to digital spaces and devices and skills to use them. The fifth and last point is that we need gender transformative approach, challenging the root causes of inequalities, not just the symptoms. Such an approach follows the entire life course of a person, considers them in all their diversity, and works with girls and young women to strengthen their agency and improve their conditions. And of course, boys and men are also crucial, as by embracing positive masculinities, they can be true gender equality allies. Lastly, this work fosters an environment where we can work together at all levels to support children and youth. Plan International runs adolescent empowerment programs all around the world and supports young people in raising awareness about COVID-19 within their own communities. For example, in Uganda, as a response, we facilitated girls' access to decision-making. In Paraguay, we provided trainings on digital participation. In Peru and Guinea, we equipped young people with devices and data credit cards to help them access decision-making spaces. Let me end by this. It's encouraging that the action plan aims to be gender responsive. However, we must move from gender responsive to gender transformative. Girls and young women deserve to thrive. We must do what we can to support them. Anything less would mean we fail them. Policies and programs need to focus on girls and young women. That's how we leave no one behind. Thank you.
Many thanks both to Harri and Kunwar for their valuable words. You raised many important issues that are strong priorities for Finland, both for the Finnish civil society, but also for the Finnish government and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I will be commenting a bit later some of these issues from the MFA's angle. But before that, I have now an honor and great pleasure of introducing our next speaker. He is the EU's human rights face and a fantastic messenger for the EU's human rights policy. Mr. Eamon Gilmore is the EU's Special Representative for Human Rights. He has previously served as an academic and also Ireland's Foreign Minister. He is also a friend and a person with whom the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland has had the pleasure of closely cooperating during the past years. Eamon, it's a real pleasure having you here today with us. The floor is now yours.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much indeed for that very warm introduction. And let me straight away congratulate the Foreign Ministry of Finland, Fida International and Plan International Finland for organising this important webinar this morning. I think this is a great example of partnership bringing together the European Union, a member state, and civil society organisations. And I also want to take the opportunity of congratulating Finland on commencing your 3-year term Human Rights Council now, and also the leadership that Finland provides in the area of human rights, and particularly relating to gender equality. I've been asked today to speak about how we can support the promotion of women's and girls' rights in accordance with the EU Action Plan on Human Rights and Democracy 2020 to 2024. This is the European Union Action Plan on Human Rights and Democracy. It's a short, concise document, but it's comprehensive. It is the only one of its kind in the world, the only action plan, the only blueprint of its kind by any regional organisation in the world. And it was agreed unanimously by all of the 27 states of the European Union just over a vote. Among its many provisions, the Action Plan on Human Rights and Democracy sets out the promotion of women's and girls' full enjoyment, human rights, gender equality, and the empowerment of women and girls as priority across all areas. It includes a number of specific objectives, such as fighting multiple intersecting forms of discrimination, advocating for the elimination, prevention, and protection in all forms of sexual and gender-based violence, social norms of harmful practices, such as female genital mutilation, female infanticide, child early before marriage. Our separate action plan on gender equality and women's empowerment in external action 2021 to 2025 complements the action plan on human rights and democracy. It serves as an ambitious agenda guiding EU action in promoting gender equality and women's empowerment worldwide. Among other benchmarks, the EU Gender Action Plan envisages that by 2025, 85% of new EU actions will have gender equality either as a significant objective or as its main objective. These two action plans are our guides for promoting gender equality, equal opportunities, and an inclusive post-pandemic recovery for everyone, everywhere in the world. As I've mentioned, the Action Plan on Human Rights and Democracy has been adopted unanimously by all of the 27 member states. So advocating for gender equality and the rights of women and girls, as well as pursuing other lines of priority action, are our joint strategy and our joint commitment. As the European Union Special Representative for Human Rights, I have a central role in guiding the implementation of this action plan. However, for both the Action Plan on Human Rights and Democracy and Gender Action Plan, the role of the 143 European Union delegations and the hundreds of member states' embassies across the world are key. They are our eyes and ears on the ground, and they are responsible for translating these action plans into individual country strategies that take into account the local context and bring life to the action plan. EU unity and joint ownership on gender equality are, of course, essential if our voice is to be effective and credible in multilateral fora. However, we cannot implement this action plan alone. Many actions are based on cooperation and partnership, and we need to listen and to work closely with other stakeholders, including the United Nations, other regional organisations, and especially civil society organisations, to improve and to address our common problems. And member states such as Finland have an important role to play in this regard. Of course, any foreign policy strategy is always only a first step and the beginning of the hard work on the ground and in political arenas. So let me give you a few examples of the concrete EU efforts behind the Action Plan on Human Rights and Democracy and the Gender Action Plan. Violence against women and girls is one of the major obstacles to women's empowerment and a scourge, often leaving a lasting mark on their victims. The Spotlight Initiative, which the European Union launched in partnership with the United Nations, with an initial contribution of €500 million, is an unprecedented global programme investing in the prevention and support to eliminate all forms of violence against women and girls. It covers physical, psychological, sexual, economic and other types of violence and discrimination, harmful practices and exclusion that women suffer in different areas of their private and public lives, from making decisions freely and independently about their sexual and reproductive life to participating effectively in the economic and political processes in their countries. There has been a particular focus on domestic and family violence, on sexual and gender-based violence, on harmful practices, on femicide, on trafficking in human beings, and sexual and economic and labour exploitation. The Spotlight Initiative is being implemented in 5 regions: in Asia, Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean, and the Pacific. Much of the effort made under the Spotlight programme is bearing fruit. In 2020, more than 650,000 women and girls were provided with gender-based violence services, despite the COVID-19 pandemic constraints and lockdowns. For instance, the legislation passed in Niger in 2019 with the support of Spotlight to increase women's participation in government, especially the quota law, has led to an increase of women's representation from 15% to 25% of elected women representatives and 25% to 30% of nominated women's representatives. In El Salvador, more than 20,000 young people and 284 teachers have received training on comprehensive sexual education. In addition, the EU is co-leading the Action Coalition on Gender-Based Violence within the Generation Equality Forum. Actions in the coalition include objectives to ensure accountability for gender-based violence, to improve access to justice for women and girl survivors, and to expand legal aid and rights awareness. I know that Finland and some other member states have been very active in the Generation Equality Forum. Women and girls are often the first victims of crises and conflicts. Much attention has been recently drawn to the situation of women and girls in Afghanistan, and rightly so. The Taliban's seizure of power last year has hit hard on human rights defenders and women and girls at large, reversing years of incremental human rights progress. The protection of women and girls' rights is among the key political criteria for the EU's engagement with Afghanistan. The Council conclusions of the 15th of September 2021 states that EU support for Afghanistan will depend on the respect for the international legal framework and norms on human rights, including on women's and girls' rights. By the end of 2021, several meetings were held between the European External Action Service and Afghan women, which led to the decision, on the initiative of my colleague, the EU Advisor on Gender and Diversity, Ambassador Stella Ronner, to establish from early 2022 an EU-initiated forum with Afghan women leaders. It will be followed by a structured continued dialogue with women representing various sectors, both from the Afghan diaspora and within Afghanistan, in urban and rural settings, including civil society. In my own work as the EU Special Representative for Human Rights, I continue to engage extensively on women's rights and gender equality. I have addressed this issue during all of my country visits, as well as in all of the human rights dialogues that I have chaired since the start of my mandate in 2019. For instance, at the multilateral level, I delivered 2 EU statements at high-level events at the 67th session of the UN Commission on the Status of Women last March, which addressed the situation of women, environmental human rights defenders, and violence against girl children in armed conflict. I've had a number of discussions on the plight of women and girls in Afghanistan, including with the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, in the context of the first ever strategic dialogue between the EU and the OHCHR. I'm in regular contact with the chair of the Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission, Shahrazad Akbar, discussing the situation of Afghan women and girls and our support for them. And indeed, I had the privilege of meeting just this week with Shahrazad when she visited Brussels. I took part in a high-level event focused on Afghan women and girls, their rights and access to education, held at the launch of the 76th session of the UN General Assembly in September 2021. The treatment of women and girls is a litmus test and an indicator of an overall human rights protection in any given country. I want to congratulate Finland for the progress that it has achieved on gender equality and on women's status and empowerment, as witnessed by scoring very high in, for example, the Women's Peace and Security Index of 2021-2022 and the Global Gender Gap Report of 2021. I encourage Finland to use its good women's rights story throughout its Human Rights Council membership and beyond, and to continue to cooperate and to provide leadership within the European Union and among member states in a truly Team Europe spirit. It is only by continuing to collectively champion and to support the various initiatives of the European Union that we will succeed in promoting women's rights and the rights of girls. I want to thank you for the opportunity of contributing to this important report. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gilmore, for these important and strong remarks. You really showed us that the EU is committed to the advancement of the rights of women and girls in all its sectors and policies. And together we can achieve concrete results, as you mentioned. It's really our common duty to stay in this track also in the future. And you can rest assured that Finland and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland will be your partner in this work. As you will need to leave us soon, Mr. Gilmore, let me ask you one question that has come up. It's about the monitoring and measuring of the action plan, actually both action plans, the EU action plan on human rights and democracy, but also the gender action plan. Could you say a few words or elaborate just with a couple of minutes how this is done, and do you see any challenges in this work? Thank you.
Well, when the action plan was adopted, the High Representative Joseph Borrell was very clear that he did not want this action plan to just sit on a shelf, that he wanted it implemented. And so the action provides for a number of means by which it will be implemented in practice. First of all, through the country strategies that have to be agreed in each of the 143 countries where the European Union has delegations. That has already been done throughout those countries, led by the European Union delegation, working with the of our member states and consulting with civil society. On the basis of those strategies, because obviously the situation, the human rights environment and situation varies so much from country to country, we will receive each year a country report from the EU delegation, again, which is done in collaboration with the member states' embassies, and that in turn informs an annual report on human rights and democracy in the world, which is produced by the European External Action Service and which is published for general consumption. We have, of course, already begun implementing some key areas that are in the action plan. One of the first commitments which was delivered was the establishment of the global human rights sanctions regime. That was a commitment in the action plan, and that was agreed in December of 2021, and sanctions began to be imposed in February. We have also made provision for a midterm review of the action plan, and again that will be done following discussion and consultation with civil society. So through this year, particularly the latter part 2022, I envisage that we will have extensive consultations with civil society organisations, which then will lead to the midterm review of the action plan in 2023. And then in addition to that, the High Representative and the action plan has asked me to play a leading role or a central role in guiding the implementation of the action plan. And of course, I work very closely with the External Action Service and with the Commission services, and of course with Member States about that. And indeed, I will have the opportunity next week of speaking with the Political and Security Committee of the Council, the ambassadors of the Member States about how that work is progressing.
Thank you so much, Eamon, once again for your visit in this event, and we will for sure continue being in touch, and you can trust that Finland is your ally in this important work also in the future. Thank you so much. Now I have an honor of introducing our next speaker. He is Dr. Dennis Mukwege, a gynecologist and a human rights activist from the Democratic Republic of Congo. He received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2018 for his global efforts to end the use of rape as a weapon of war. Dr. Mukwege founded the Panzi Hospital and Foundation and has become one of the world's leading specialists on treating survivors of wartime sexual violence. And as noted in the beginning, Mr. Mukwege will give his statement in French, and it has English subtitles.
Mesdames et messieurs, je tiens à remercier nos partenaires de Fida pour nous confier à prendre la parole à cette conférence organisée avec Plan International et le ministère finlandais des Affaires étrangères. Le sujet qui nous rassemble aujourd'hui, assurer des cadres de vie sûrs pour les femmes et les jeunes filles grâce à la promotion du plan d'action de l'Union européenne pour le droit de l'homme et démocratie 2020-2024 est d'une grande importance à nos yeux. Permettez-moi avant tout de faire deux observations. D'abord, en tant que citoyen congolais, les droits humains et la démocratie dans notre pays, qui sont souvent considérés comme des droits universels, tendent davantage à rester les idéaux à atteindre que des réalités tangibles pour mes compatriotes. Il s'agit même d'une légende pour la majorité de la population congolaise, car notre jeunesse n'a connu que malheureusement des régimes autoritaires, des régimes qui ont tout simplement abusé de leurs droits, des guerres à répétition, des crises chroniques, d'instabilité politique et la culture de l'impunité. Ensuite, en tant que citoyens du monde, en ce début du XXIe siècle, nous assistons avec consternation à une crise de la démocratie et l'érosion des droits humains en général et malheureusement des droits des femmes en particulier. Les idées extrémistes, radicales et xénophobes tentent à se banaliser dans de nombreuses sociétés et dans les discours politiques de nombreux pays, au point d'être parfois reprises par les partis politiques démocratiques. En outre, cette tendance inquiétante, caractérisée par l'essor des politiques liberticides, a été exacerbée par la pandémie de Covid-19 Et comme dans toutes les périodes de crise, les droits des femmes et des jeunes filles sont particulièrement fragilisés. Mesdames et messieurs, c'est sous ce double prisme des citoyens congolais et des citoyens du monde que nous percevons l'Union européenne en général et la Finlande en particulier comme un phare pour le monde, un lueur d'espoir pour lutter contre les forces conservatrices enclines à faire régresser les principes démocratiques et les droits humains des femmes. Le plan d'action de l'Union européenne pour les droits de l'homme et la démocratie nous rappelle donc, dans un contexte de crise globale, que les droits humains constituent non seulement une des valeurs fondamentales de l'Union européenne, mais aussi l'un des objectifs qui inspirent ses relations extérieures. Par conséquent, il est impératif de réaffirmer aujourd'hui, haut et fort, les acquis d'hier pour les consolider demain et les léguer aux générations futures. En effet, il est indispensable de se souvenir que jusqu'il y a peu, les femmes n'avaient pas le droit de voter, de travailler ou de posséder leur corps, posséder leurs biens et passer de la tutelle de leur père à celle de leur mari. Dans le contexte d'après-guerre, où une génération presque entière d'hommes était tombée au combat ou blessée, les femmes ont montré leur capacité, ont montré par leur courage et leur plus-value que les relations entre les genres ne sont pas statiques, mais au contraire peuvent évoluer et être changées. Ainsi, les femmes ont progressivement acquis des responsabilités professionnelles, gagné leur autonomie financière, le droit de disposer de leur corps, d'être élues à la tête d'une entreprise ou d'un État. Ces changements ont profondément modifié le paradigme de la domination masculine pour embrasser une conception plus inclusive basée sur l'égalité et le respect mutuel. Dans de nombreux endroits du monde, à l'instar de la Finlande, ce bouleversement des relations entre les femmes et les hommes opérait tant dans la sphère familiale que dans l'ensemble de la société a été un facteur prépondérant du développement humain et social, de la croissance économique et de la construction des sociétés démocratiques progressistes. Mesdames et messieurs, les avancées remarquables de ces dernières décennies, qui sont l'un des plus grands progrès du XXe siècle, demeurent fragiles. Les droits humains des femmes sont bafoués ou remis en cause quotidiennement sur tous les continents. Comme le souligne d'ailleurs, et ceci à juste titre, Simone de Beauvoir, dans son livre Le deuxième sexe, n'oubliez jamais qu'il suffira d'une crise politique, économique ou religieuse pour que les droits des femmes soient remis en question. Ces droits ne sont jamais acquis. Vous devriez rester vigilante votre vie durant. Cette phrase datant de 1949 reste d'une grande actualité aujourd'hui. Et nous pensons évidemment aux femmes afghanes aujourd'hui, livrées à elles-mêmes face à l'obscurantisme, mais aussi à toutes ces régions du monde où les femmes n'ont pas le droit de disposer librement de leur corps, sont mariées de force alors qu'elles devraient plutôt aller à l'école ou encore ont tout simplement peur de sortir de chez eux, des craintes d'être harcelés. Dans le contexte global où les droits des femmes et les droits des jeunes filles sont à la croisée des chemins, il est donc crucial que la mise en œuvre de ces plans d'action de l'Union européenne pour le droit de l'homme et la démocratie oriente et guide la politique étrangère et de sécurité commune de l'Union européenne vers la promotion et la protection des droits humains des femmes. Mesdames, messieurs, aucun des grands défis de l'humanité ne pourra se faire sans la participation pleine et effective des femmes, qui constituent plus de la moitié de l'espèce humaine. Nous pensons notamment à l'instauration de la paix dans des pays qui aspirent à sortir des conflits ou de la réalisation des objectifs de développement durable à travers le monde. Ici, est de rappeler ici que la promotion et la protection des droits des femmes ne concernent pas que l'égalité entre les sexes, l'objectif de développement durable numéro 5, et la réduction des inégalités qui est l'objectif de développement durable numéro 6, mais aussi l'éradication plutôt de la pauvreté qui est l'objectif de développement durable numéro 1, la lutte contre la faim, l'objectif numéro 2, l'accès à la santé, notamment sexuelle et reproductive, qui est l'objectif de développement durable numéro 3, et la promotion d'une éducation de qualité, l'objectif de développement durable numéro 4, la paix et la justice, objectif numéro 16, et les partenariats pour la réalisation des objectifs, qui est l'objectif numéro 17. C'est à la lumière de ces constats de la place fondamentale des femmes dans tous les aspects de notre vie que l'Union européenne et la Finlande devraient jouer un rôle de premier plan pour éliminer les violences, les abus et les discriminations qui affectent les femmes et les jeunes filles dans la sphère familiale ou professionnelle, en privé ou en public, car ces violences, ces abus et ces discriminations sont tout simplement des obstacles au progrès de toute communauté humaine. En outre, l'expression latente de ces violences dans les sociétés en période de paix se révèle de manière patente dans le contexte des guerres, et ceci, on peut très bien l'observer en République démocratique du Congo, où on peut se poser la question de ces abus, de ces violences extrêmes, où le recours aux violences de façon massive et méthodique, recours à la violence sexuelle comme arme de guerre et comme stratégie de terreur a été utilisé malheureusement par tous les belligérants dans les conflits, et ceci, c'est depuis un quart de siècle. Mesdames et messieurs, face à ces atrocités commises sur notre ressource la plus précieuse, les femmes et les jeunes filles, nous avons progressivement développé un modèle de prise en charge holistique pour nos patientes. Ce modèle de guichet unique, ou One Stop Center, a pour objectif de répondre au même endroit aux différents besoins de nos patientes, qui sont ensuite guidés dans un système de référencement interne à la carte où elles peuvent recevoir un accompagnement personnalisé centré sur leurs besoins. Cette prise en charge englobe des soins psychologiques et médicaux, une réintégration économique et sociale, un accès gratuit à la justice. Et chaque jour, nous sommes émerveillés par la résilience et la force de nos patientes. Cette assistance holistique et cet accompagnement permet aux victimes de récupérer d'abord psychologiquement, puis physiquement, et ensuite d'acquérir de nouvelles compétences pour intégrer leur communauté avec une valeur ajoutée qui bénéficiera à l'ensemble de la communauté. Nous sommes très fiers d'accompagner cette transformation de la souffrance en force, car les survivantes deviennent des leaders communautaires et des agents du changement, défendant non seulement leurs droits et ceux de leurs enfants, mais on est surpris de voir à quel point elles défendent également les droits humains et la dignité pour tous. Nous plaidons aujourd'hui pour que cette assistance holistique des qualités soit considérée comme un droit humain à la réhabilitation lorsque les femmes ont subi des violences sexuelles. Nous aspirons à ce que le modèle de prise en charge holistique développé à Panzi soit dupliqué avec le soutien de l'Union européenne et de la Finlande, bien sûr, dans toutes les situations où le besoin de prise en charge des survivants ou survivantes existe. Mesdames et messieurs, notre responsabilité ne peut se limiter à réparer les conséquences de la violence, mais doit avant tout veiller à les prévenir. En matière de prévention, il faut avant tout privilégier une éducation qui favorise l'égalité et met fin aux pratiques néfastes et aux coutumes rétrogrades, car la violence sexuelle est une expression d'un rapport de domination et de pouvoir que le système patriarcal a nourri depuis des siècles. Il faut non seulement garantir un accès égal à l'éducation aux jeunes filles, mais aussi initier nos enfants à la masculinité positive depuis le plus jeune âge pour qu'une nouvelle génération égalité grandisse dans un esprit de respect mutuel et de complémentarité plutôt harmonieuse. Enfin, nous exhortons l'Union européenne et la Finlande à redoubler d'efforts pour lutter contre l'impunité dont jouissent les auteurs de viols et de violences basées sur le genre. La lutte contre l'impunité reste le maillon faible de toutes les stratégies pour répondre aux violences sexuelles et protéger les survivantes. Il faut combler les fossés entre les droits et la pratique. Ces climats d'impunité pour les crimes à caractère sexuel envoient tout simplement aux bourreaux le message qu'ils ont le champ libre pour poursuivre leur forfait sur le corps des femmes et des jeunes filles. Comment se fait-il, par exemple, que les Nations Unies aient documenté 617 crimes internationaux dans le rapport mapping sur les violations les plus graves des droits de l'homme et du droit humanitaire commises en République démocratique du Congo entre 1993 et 2003, une période où les violences sexuelles, comme méthode de guerre, a ravagé les vies de centaines de milliers de femmes et que la communauté internationale n'a toujours pas établi un tribunal international pénal pour le Congo 11 ans après la publication de ces rapports. C'est tout simplement une façon de promouvoir l'impunité. Et lorsqu'on fait la promotion de l'impunité, malheureusement, le message qui est donné au bourreau, c'est que vous pouvez continuer. Et ça, c'est de notre responsabilité, tous, de lutter contre l'impunité des violences sexuelles faites aux femmes. Mesdames et messieurs, il nous paraît crucial que dans le cadre de la mise en œuvre du plan d'action de l'Union européenne pour le droit de l'homme et la démocratie, toutes les instances de l'Union européenne et la Finlande en particulier se mobilisent avec une réelle volonté politique pour combler les déficits en matière de respect de l'obligation de rendre de comptes. Lutter contre l'impunité et soutenir tous les mécanismes de la justice transitionnelle pour mettre un terme à la tragédie et au scandale de l'impunité qui règne en République démocratique du Congo depuis 25 ans. Nous attendons de l'Union européenne et ses États membres de ne plus dérouler les tapis rouges aux potentats pyromanes de la région des Grands Lacs africains qui déstabilisent la RDC en toute impunité et de pleinement exploiter le potentiel du nouveau régime mondial des sanctions établi avec la loi Magnitsky européenne. En outre, nous exhortons la diplomatie et la coopération européenne et finlandaise à poursuivre un dialogue politique fort avec les autorités congolaises en matière de justice et apporter une aide technique et financière pour faire adopter une stratégie nationale holistique de justice transitionnelle et la mettre en œuvre sans tarder. Enfin, nous invitons la Finlande et tous les États européens à faire pleinement usage du principe de la compétence universelle pour les crimes les plus graves commis en République démocratique du Congo, à l'instar de la récente première mise en examen prononcée dans le cadre d'une procédure judiciaire ouverte en France sur la base du rapport mapping dans l'affaire Lumbala. Mesdames et messieurs, il n'y a pas de fatalité. On ne peut pas continuer à penser que c'est un sort jeté aux Africains, aux Congolais en particulier. Les chemins existent pour construire une société meilleure et plus juste, favorisant l'épanouissement de tous, où les femmes jouissent dignement des mêmes droits que les hommes. Ne soyons pas tout simplement indifférents au sort des milliers de femmes à travers le monde qui sont assassinées ou soumises à un traitement inhumain, tout simplement puisqu'elles sont nées femmes. Mobilisons-nous, hommes et femmes, dans un esprit de solidarité, de coopération et de respect mutuel, à l'échelle individuelle et collective, locale et globale, pour construire un monde meilleur, débarrassé des violences basées sur le genre. Ces rêves est possible. Chacun de nous peut contribuer à les transformer en réalité. Agissons ensemble, dès aujourd'hui, pour un monde plus digne, plus équitable et plus pacifique, en nous mobilisant aux côtés des femmes. En le faisant, nous créons un monde égalitaire, juste, où il fait beau vivre. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Dr. Mukwege, for this important and very timely message. You have touched upon many issues that are of crucial importance to the full enjoyment of all human rights of all women and girls around the globe. As you have just stated, so many issues remain unsolved. Far too many women and girls are targeted and their rights are denied. Those that were already in a vulnerable situation have been severely impacted by the ongoing pandemic. Too many are at this very moment living under threat of harassment, even violence, online or offline. This is the case both in the global south and in global north, also in my own country, Finland. During recent months, we have been informed that sexual and gender-based violence is on the increase also here in our country and in our continent. I would also like to thank Dr. Mukwege for his valuable thoughts and recommendations to the European Union and its member states. I could not agree more on the need to step up action for human rights also at the EU level. As a Finnish woman, civil servant and a human rights lawyer, I fully concur with your statement that the only way to build more democratic, just, and resilient societies is to protect and fulfill all human rights of all women and girls, who form 50% of the population everywhere. Dear audience, for Finland, safeguarding and promoting gender equality, non-discrimination, and the rights of women and girls have been and continue to be amongst the most important priorities in our foreign and development policies. Our aim is and must continue to be to take global leadership in the protection and promotion of all human rights of all women and girls in all their diversity. This applies to women and girls in all spheres of life and in all ages. We must protect young girls and older women, women with disabilities, LGBTIQ+ women, and indigenous women need protection. Women and girls belonging to various ethnic or religious or other minorities need our full attention as well. In particular, we should put all our effort in promoting those that are vulnerable to multiple or intersecting discrimination. However, we should always bear in mind that women and girls are actors of change, not just victims. Dear participants, Finland's standing point is that these priorities and commitments are shared, not only by Finland, but the European Union as a whole. The EU Action Plan on Human Rights and Democracy for 2020 to 2024 is quite clear on this, as was previously already noted by the EU Special Representative, Mr. Gilmore. When the EU Action Plan was negotiated a couple of years ago in various EU Council working parties, Finland's first priority, together with many other member states, was to ensure that it contains strong and preferably gender transformative language on the rights of women and girls, as well as on gender equality and non-discrimination. In many ways, we managed to get good results. The action plan sets fine standards for the EU to be more active in promoting women's and girls' rights in its external action. Naturally, our action will need to be tailor-made to each individual context. Here, the role of the EU delegations and embassies of the EU member states, including Finland's own embassies, remains of crucial importance. In addition, we must closely engage with international, regional, and local civil society, human rights actors, and human rights defenders on the ground. As also noted by Mr. Gilmore, they are our eyes and ears in the world as regards all questions, including the situation and rights of women. Naturally, it would have been even better if the wording of the EU Action Plan on Human Rights and Democracy could have been stronger. Here we need to acknowledge that the EU is a union of 27 member states and that the starting point for these questions is not the same in all countries of the Union. Anti-gender movement has made its way, and I'm saying this with heavy heart, also to the EU. Working and fighting for these rights has become more difficult, sometimes almost unbearable. Issues that used to be easy for the EU are not anymore that easy. Gender transformative action is not always a possibility due to strong resistance from some stakeholders within the Union itself. We face particular challenges as regards promoting sexual and reproductive health and rights in our work. For the Finnish government, SRHR continue to be a strong priority, and we will not cease to advocate these rights also within the EU context. Naturally, we will supplement EU action by national activities, including providing political support and funds to numerous actors around the globe. For Finland, however, it remains key that the EU as a whole continues to advocate strongly for gender equality and the rights of women and girls in all sectors. We must be able to show global leadership in these matters in our bilateral relations and in multilateral fora, such as the UN, the Council of Europe, and the OSCE. Finland for sure will continue to advocate this with other like-minded countries within the EU. We should also remember that the EU is not alone in this work. Finland aligns itself closely with the Nordic countries, other Western countries, and numerous countries from the global south that also give strong priority for the rights of women and girls in their foreign policy. Finland will continue to champion gender equality, non-discrimination, and the rights of women and girls also as a member of the UN Human Rights Council. This January 2022, we started our 3-year membership in the Human Rights Council. Just to mention one example, in the upcoming 29th session of the Human Rights Council, Finland will present with Mexico a traditional joint statement on the occasion of the International Women's Day. In previous years, close to 100 UN member states from all regions have joined this important statement. It is yet another proof that promoting the rights of women and girls is not just a Western value, but a truly universal issue that is shared among the nations around the globe. Dear friends, with this, I would like to thank for this opportunity to address this webinar on behalf of the Ministry for Foreign Affairs. Thank you. And now, dear audience, we will have your say. We have received some questions and comments during this panel. Thank you for each and every one. And now I will also invite Kunwar and Harri to the stage. Welcome.
Thank you.
And we have received some questions indeed, and I will try to read them here from the chat. First of all, there is a question to Harri.
Okay.
Considering the current situation, what is the most urgent action area to be done to advance girls' and women's rights, in your opinion?
My opinion is that everything starts from the education. Advancing girls' education, it's crucial importance in our work, and also women's participation in all levels of decision making in those countries where we do work.
Thank you, Harri. There's also a question to Kunwar. Why do we need to pay attention specifically to girls? What's your opinion?
Well, it's actually a well-known fact from numerous impact studies that investing in capacity of girls and women, it's not only the individuals that benefit, it's the whole community that benefits, and it's a very good way to advance development in general. Of course, what we've seen now during the past years is a huge decline in equality worldwide, so it's even more important than before. And investing in girls means also investing in boys, because we need boys and men to support this development. So there are many reasons, many good reasons.
Thank you, Kunwar. I completely agree that this work should not be left only on the shoulders of women and girls, but we absolutely need all genders. Then there is a question, I guess, for me. What can and should European Union do to create a larger impact when it comes to preventing further human rights violations against girls and women? What can we do to? I guess Mr. Gilmore is not anymore available, so maybe this is just an opinion of one EU member state, Finland, and I can only speak on behalf of Finland, but I think one important thing is to be united in our messages, so that when we really say something, we say it with a strong and united voice. And this we all know. I referred to the anti-gender movement in my statement. This is a reality also here in Europe and in the European Union, and this is something that we shouldn't allow to come to European Union or impact its statements. We must stay strong, united, and at all levels. So it's not just the civil servants or the human rights actors, human rights organizations, but it's really everybody who is saying this at all levels. Also, of course, at the political level, we need these statements. So this is at least one concrete thing that we could do, and maybe be stronger than we are at the moment. There was another question also about the anti-gender movement. What can be done? Well, that's more tricky here. I'm happy to hear also if you have ideas, because we know that the anti-gender movement is very well organized. It's global. It's well financed. The messages are the same all over the world, basically, and it's something we see more and more in the governmental level. I don't know if you have comments on
just
this.
a few comments. I think, first of all, speaking up is really important. Those like-minded who stay silent, they actually don't help very much. Secondly, I think for government representatives to also support local society, local civil society, wherever it exists, in order to help them speak up and act, that's equally important. But there is, of course, a lot of work that needs to be done.
Absolutely, and it's very important that here also the governmental and non-governmental actors join forces, and our messages are aligned here, and we have to. I think it's a good saying that we have to fight speech with more speech. So if there is anti-gender speech, so we have to be stronger in our statements.
Yes, that's what we can agree on.
Exactly. Then there is one question in the chat. How do government and non-government organizations work in authoritarian states such as North Korea to further women's rights? Is the advancement of women's rights possible in authoritarian states?
Yeah.
Would one of you like to comment?
Of course, we worked in North Korea for 20 years, and then we had to stop the work there because of international sanctions. And of course, it's always a challenge. It's very difficult to challenge an authoritarian state, but still we can always promote in the grassroots level the girls and women's rights. But I think in North Korea, it's not that bad situation like in Congo DRC, what we heard. So
I think
it depends on the country.
Yeah, I don't think there is one way of doing it, but of course the rhetorics of the North doesn't work in authoritarian states. But you mentioned education, how important that education is always a very good tool to empower young people, empower women. But of course also with the empowerment comes responsibility for those who support this. So I think we we also take responsibilities that we should live up to as donors, for example, in these situations. But I think NGOs in general have been very innovative in finding ways to also work in authoritarian states, and that's also where support from like-minded governments are very important in this work.
Yes, maybe just to comment this also on behalf of a governmental actor. My personal opinion is that in extreme conditions, sometimes it's easier to work in a grassroots level that non-governmental organizations often represent. The government's role in the country perhaps is not possible at all, but of course we can support those civil society actors by giving them finances or other support. And then where we act, it's basically in our bilateral relations, of course. I mean, we need to take human rights up with each and every country, including the most authoritarian ones, and we do. We have to do this at all levels, and use both silent and public diplomacy, I guess. I mean, sometimes we need public diplomacy, statements at the Human Rights Council, for example. Then there are sometimes cases where silent diplomacy is the best way to go forward. Of course, we have to also apply the do no harm principle. Sometimes it's better to work behind the scenes, but very often both are needed. So both multilateral action statements, but also discussions bilaterally.
I think it's fair to say also that it is in some ways at least becoming more difficult, as there are more and more places in the world where you don't have clear stakeholders to relate to. And even if an authoritarian government is sometimes easier to deal with than when there are multiple non-official actors that you need to know. And this is unfortunately the case in many humanitarian settings today.
So I guess there is no one solution that fits all, not in your work.
And no shortcuts.
No shortcuts, yeah.
Changing the culture is something it takes decades sometimes.
Yes, I agree. And sometimes we take few steps back and then one step further, and this is how it, I guess, will be.
But we have to work together. That's the only way.
Very much agreed. And also at the EU level, I think the same applies. I mean, the EU member states can do a lot together when they are united, but even the EU cannot do much without the help from the civil society and non-governmental actors and the human rights actors on the ground. So we definitely need both. I think we are running out of time. Unfortunately, there were some questions that maybe we don't have time to take up now. Hopefully we can continue this discussion. I think there would be so much to discuss, and also sort of have a joint brainstorming. What can we do better? But thank you so much, Harri. Thank you, Kunwar, thank you in general for this excellent cooperation. It's really been a great pleasure.
Thank you.
And dear audience, it's time for closing remarks. We have heard today so many excellent statements, so much substance. I think it takes a long time for all of us to absorb everything. I have learned a lot myself, and we will continue to address these questions also at the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Finland. So on my behalf, thank you so much. And now we will hear closing remarks from Hanna and Anna from Fida and Plan, and yet again my sincere thanks to both of you for all your work. Thank you.
Dear audience, I'd like to thank you and our speakers on behalf of Plan International Finland, Fida International, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland. We've heard important insights on advancing girls' and women's rights in accordance with EU Action Plan on Human Rights and Democracy. We all seem to agree that without respect for gender equality and the implementation of sound policies, it is not possible for EU to achieve any of the overarching themes of the new action plan. All speakers pointed out that gender equality is increasingly challenged by current international and national political trends. For example, the degeneration of democracy and the rights of girls and women. Not all agree on the importance of girls' and women's rights, not even within the EU. It would be a mistake to take the pro-gender equality movement for granted. We will never wake up to a gender equal world by accident. Girls' and women's rights won't just happen by themselves. Therefore, we must continue advocating for gender equality in both internal politics and external relations. I believe that this should be the agenda for everyone. Executive Director Harri Hakola from Fida International emphasized the need to go beyond rhetoric by including women in all foreign policy action areas and by implementing gender equality as stated in the EU Action Plan in a more systematic manner. Will the EU and its member states fully endorse the Action Plan on Human Rights and Democracy and take determined action? Time will tell. Plan International's Chair of Board, Kunwar Krugman, encouraged the EU to take steps towards a gender transformative approach in its policies and actions, as it is critical to work with the root causes of inequality in order to tackle them. Most importantly, we must invite girls and young women in all their diversity to the tables where decisions are made. Especially in the challenging times of COVID-19, we must not leave anyone behind.
Dear audience, EU Special Representative Eamon Gilmore stressed that advocating for gender equality and the rights of women and girls is a unanimously adopted joint strategy and a joint commitment of the EU and its member states. Concrete initiatives to advance both action plans have been made. However, the EU cannot succeed alone. Stakeholder involvement and collective action by organizations at all levels is required if the action plans are to be coherently implemented. Nobel Peace Laureate Dr. Mukwege touched us by a strong message of not being indifferent to the fate of women who are treated inhumanly or abused sexually. To combat sexual violence and impunity, build accountability and transitional justice mechanisms, it is crucial for the EU, including Finland, to take a strong stand and implement the EU Action Plan on Human Rights and Democracy fully. This could mean using the new global human rights sanctions regime in cases of systematic sexual violence. We welcome Deputy Director Janina Hassansson's comment on Finland's will for global leadership in the protection and promotion of human rights of women and girls. Because individual circumstances vary widely, solutions must be intersectional, contextual, and based on local partnerships. It is essential that Finland continues to stand for girls' and women's rights, both in bilateral and multilateral forums, even when the anti-gender movement is blocking such initiatives. Finally, the European Union's role in advancing girls' and young women's rights is undisputed. It is important that the EU is coherent in its actions and policies, sets bold and ambitious goals, and leads the way to a gender equal world. Most relevantly, the EU should include girls and women to the processes affecting them. No one organization can achieve gender equality by itself. The efforts of all of us are needed. Let us not only believe in the power of women, but make it reality. Thank you for participating in this webinar. I wish all of you a pleasant evening and success in advancing girls' and women's rights. Thank you.
Thank you.